Saving America one entrepreneur at a time, it's the Biz Wrap Podcast with your host, Michael Manahan. The show that celebrates small business and entrepreneurs, it's Biz Wrap Radio with your host, small businessman, educator, and author, Michael Manahan. And welcome to another edition of Biz Wrap Radio. It's your host, Mike Manahan, and thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a tremendous show, as always, lined up for you. If you've not listened to Biz Wrap Radio before, we are the show that's all about small business and entrepreneurs. We're here to help you small business people, the drivers of the U.S. economy, make your life easier, help you make more money, run your business more effectively, enjoy the money you make. I don't know what's happened, but somehow the word profit has been convoluted in our society to the degree where it's almost become a dirty word, but really it's not. If you're an entrepreneur, your obligation is to make a profit. Use that money to take care of yourself. Use that money to take care of your family and friends, and if you've got enough left over, use that money to take care of the members of your community. Somehow this whole world got twisted around, and it seems what you do is you make money and you write a check to the government for 40% of what you make, and you let them take care of everything. But you know, that's not the way it works, and we're never going to have good, solid communities if people don't take care of their communities. And one thing I love as I travel around the United States and I talk to entrepreneurs all over is how actively involved entrepreneurs and small business people are in their communities, whether it's sponsoring the local baseball team, whether it's sending leftovers from the restaurant down to the food shelter, whether it's helping out on a pancake breakfast to raise money for the Girl Scouts. I mean, entrepreneurs and small business people are actively involved in their community. So make money as an entrepreneur and spread it around. Spread it around in your community and with your family and friends. Speaking of guests on the show, I am very pleased today to have somebody on the show who can help us entrepreneurs with something that we all suffer from, and that is stress. I've got Melissa Heisler on the phone. She's a stress reduction expert and author. She's the author of the book From Type A to Type Me, How to Stop Doing Life and Start Living. And boy, can we use that. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to talk to your listeners because I love the entrepreneur, and I know firsthand how much stress there can be as you're building your business, and hopefully we can give a couple tips to help them manage that.
And I'll tell you what causes me stress. All I need to do is collect the mail, and you know what you do when you collect mail? You start thumbing through it. You don't just start opening everything. You start thumbing through the mail because you're always looking for checks and things like that. And then all of a sudden there's a letter from the IRS, and all of a sudden there's this big pit in the middle of your stomach, and your blood pressure starts to elevate immediately, and you go, oh my God, they're after me. What do people do about that? How do you manage that kind of stress?
Well, you know what you've actually hit on the main issue with that is you didn't even open the letter. You just saw that it was from the IRS, and immediately you created a story that they're coming after you. And I think that this is really the cause of stress, is when we are not in the present moment seeing reality, but are caught up in our future fears. We're afraid of the IRS taking money from us. We're afraid of not having enough clients. And it's all things in the future, that what if. And if we can stay in the present and actually open the letter and see what it says and see if it needs to even be addressed, that can cut down half of our stress level right there.
So it's almost like we're jumping to conclusions rather than working with all the facts.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, maybe it's because in the past when we received a letter from this person that X happened. And so we assume that every time we receive that letter from that individual, we're going to have the same situation.
Gotcha.
So we're kind of reliving our past versus looking at the reality and the facts of the current situation.
Well, I used to worry when I got a letter from the IRS, but I've stopped worrying about that because I'll tell you, about 6 months ago, my computer with all of my accounting records and all of my emails on it crashed and nothing was recoverable. So I've got no records of anything for the past 5 years. So I figure I don't have anything to worry from the IRS.
They're going to have a really hard time finding anything on you, I guess.
Well, I of course I'm being facetious, but I don't think they would buy that excuse. You know, the only one who gets away with that excuse, of course, is the head of the IRS, right?
Right.
Okay, so we need to deal with reality, obviously. But you're somebody who's suffered from a lot of stress in your life, but you've overcome it. What was your journey? How did you manage to do that?
Well, it was a couple different stages, and I'll kind of give you the Reader's Digest here. But I was in corporate America. Actually, I started my career in theater. I was doing stage management and directing. And so, that's kind of the show must go on mentality. No matter what, the show must go on. So that's my base core of who I am. And then I spent 18 years in the world of marketing with deadlines and flying around the country for different events. And what happened was I started to become physically ill. I had inflammation, I had pain, I was having digestive issues, I was a wreck. And I went to doctor after doctor because I didn't realize that it was my stress. It was the stress that I was experiencing that was causing these physical issues. And it was years that I went through this. I went from doctor after doctor after doctor to try to find out what was wrong. I thought I had some serious illness going on. And finally there was one doctor who said, well, I don't know what it is, but maybe we'll give you a hysterectomy. Maybe that will help.
Wow, that's pretty serious.
That was pretty serious. And with the maybes on there saying, let's take out an organ and see if that helps you. It might help. I didn't think that was a really good choice. And that led me on this journey that actually I ended up in desperation working with a shaman in Peru,
wow,
which is a native medicine man.
Yeah.
And so it was an amazing trip, but what I really learned from that trip was that after 10 days and 2 shamans and all these amazing things that happened to me down there, I felt fantastic. All the physical symptoms that I had were gone. It was an incredible healing. But I'm not here to talk about, going down to Peru for everybody to get rid of their stress.
Yeah, no, I imagine there's some guy right now who's running his business and he's sitting at his desk, he's chain smoking, he's eating fast food, he's working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to keep the doors open. He's got his suppliers calling, demanding money. The Edison is threatening to shut his light bill off. I mean, this guy doesn't have time for a getaway down in Peru to spend a couple of weeks with a shaman.
Absolutely. And really what I learned was the moment I landed in Miami and I picked up my baggage and went through customs and tried to find my connecting flight, I felt all the physical symptoms starting to come back. And it was really at that moment that I realized that there wasn't anything wrong with me that I wasn't doing to myself. So in the example you gave of the individual who's chain smoking at his desk and eating fast foods, it's really his responsibility to look at what he's doing to try to manage his stress and find new, healthier ways to do it. And, I was the same way. When I get stressed out, my go-to is caffeine, and it's one of the worst foods or chemicals that I can put in my body personally. It's horrible for me. But it's that thing that I react to when I feel stressed. So the first thing to do is to minimize stress levels, which maybe we can talk about later, but it's also to notice what we're doing when we're stressed. Are we grabbing for those things that are not going to help us? but we think they are, kind of like those comfort foods or that next cigarette.
Okay, Melissa,
or are we...
Melissa, we're going to need to talk about this more right after the break because we got to go to commercials. It's Biz Rap Radio, your host, Mike Manahan. I'm on with Melissa Heisler, stress reduction expert and author, and we'll be back right after these messages. And welcome back to Biz Rap Radio. It's your host, Mike Manahan. Thank you for joining us today. And if you just joined us, we are on the line with Melissa Heisler. Melissa is a stress reduction expert and author. She's author of From Type A to Type Me, How to Stop Doing Life and Start Living. And, of course, I'm talking to entrepreneurs and business people literally all day long. And something that I notice is a lot of them appear to be suffering from stress, and I expect a lot of them are being killed by that stress. Well, Melissa, thanks for sticking with us for another segment on the show. You've got some great ideas about how we can manage stress, and you were talking about when stress occurs, how sometimes we'll go to things that, I'm not sure what you call them, but you mentioned you get under stress and you immediately go for the caffeine, but that's actually the worst thing you can do to manage your stress. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely, and caffeine is horrible for me personally. Part of understanding this is what is good for you. There's so many experts out there that'll tell you to drink this and not drink that, and all of our bodies are different. So my husband is a caffeine fiend, and it's perfectly fine with his body. I can look at one of his caffeine drinks, and it'll cause havoc in my body. So I just want to be clear that I'm not telling everybody to give up caffeine. It's much more of an awareness of what do you go to when you're stressed. When you get that letter from the IRS, what do you reach for, whether it's a cigarette or a cup of coffee or you want to punch the wall or whatever it is that you do as a unconscious reaction to the stress that you're experiencing. And once you become aware of it, really to look at, is it really helping you? Or is it actually adding on more stress? In my example, I would reach for that cup of coffee because I was stressed, because I wanted it to make me feel better. But when I stopped and actually looked at the situation, it was making me more tense. It was not giving me the relief that I expected it to.
So we need to be more aware of what we're doing when we're under stressful situations or when stress is affecting us. But, before we go any further, Melissa, this is such interesting stuff, and I really want people to think about this because, of course, I know what happens. Busy entrepreneurs and small business people are thinking about how do I make sales, how do I collect money from my customers, how do I manage those dysfunctional employees that work for me. And they very often are not taking care of themselves. And I want to make sure they have this information. So where does somebody go, Melissa, if they want to find out more about you and about your writings?
They can go to the website From Type A to TypeMe.com, where they can actually download a free chapter of my book and learn a little bit more about my theory that we're all becoming stressed out type A's and what we can do to be able to minimize that. And I also want to comment when you say that, your entrepreneurs are so caught up in their daily work and getting the sales and making sure everything's working that they don't want time for self-care. Mm-hmm. And actually, if they take a few moments every day to center themselves, to make sure they're giving themselves the right food, to remember they have to breathe throughout the day, just some really simple things, but to take care of themselves, they actually become more efficient. This is not like a nice to do, but it's actually a way, if you want to be more efficient and more effective, taking care of yourself is the first step in doing that.
Yeah, that is really good advice, and everybody has those things that kind of put them on a better plane. And I find, for instance, one is exercise. I don't feel any better per se when I have regular workouts. Somebody will say, "Oh, I worked out, I feel great." I feel okay, but what I find is I just seem to function better if I have my regular workouts. So it's not the workout; it's the effect it has on the rest of the day, if you will. I just seem to just function better. I seem to handle the ups and downs of business better. I just seem to go through a more pleasant day if I've gotten that workout in the morning. And, and I recognize that. So other people need to find those same releases for them that will allow them to manage their own stress levels, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yes, and there's many different ways to accomplish that. There's a lot of people who can do it through exercise. There's also people who like to do it through meditation, or I know when I was totally stressed out, it was just taking a walk. I had to get away from the desk to be able to calm down. When you're going through your day, a great little tool to use is to check your breathing. So when you start to notice that you're being stressed, look at what your breath is doing. Is it really short? Are you breathing in and out quickly? Is it up in your chest? And see if you can take some really deep breaths from your belly. It takes 2 minutes to do this tops. And take 2 really deep breaths and see if that can't get you back to that space without as much stress. So then you're able to address what is going on your workday.
Okay, all of a sudden something happens with one of my employees, something happens with one of my customers. I feel that hot flash going through my face. I'm just about ready to explode and blow up. Stop and take deep breaths. Is that what you're recommending?
Yes, it's almost like giving yourself a timeout.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a child who's acting up, he's had too much sugar, or he's just at that age where he's reactionary to everything. Send yourself to that corner and just take a few moments away from the stressor. And then when you come back to it, you're going to be more clear-headed, and you're going to be able to address it in a much stronger fashion than you. What happens is, this is kind of getting into the neuroscience of how our brain works, but our stresses are in our, and I'm not going to get the term right here because I'm doing this off the top of my head, but there's our primal brain basically is where your fear and your stress is. And it turns off our cognitive thinking. So by going and taking a breath, giving yourself that time out, you're taking the energy away from that stress center of your brain and putting it back into the cognitive part of your brain. So it's really a powerful tool that you can use so you can make smarter business decisions.
That sounds like great advice. And again, if you want more information on this, go to www.fromtypeatotypeme.com. You can download a free chapter from Melissa's book, and maybe that'll help you relieve some stress. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm sure you've been asked this before, but remember, we are on terrestrial radio. We have to be careful what we say. But how does sex play a role in stress? Is it a stress reliever, or does it create more stress, or do you have any information on that at all?
Well, I can't really say that I'm a stress or a sex stress expert. I guess it depends on where you're coming from. It's the same as like exercise. The exercise can feel like an obligation and an additional stressor if we feel we have to do it because we have to lose 10 more pounds. But if we do the exercise because we're choosing to do it and we know it makes us feel better, we're going to come with it at a very different attitude. And so I would say the same thing with stress. If we're coming at it like an obligation and something that we feel we need to do in our relationship, but we're actually kind of too stressed to do it, we're not being focused, it may feel not so good to us. But if we see it as something that is going to enhance and slow us down and get us back to the important things of life, it can be an incredible stress reliever.
Okay, so I guess the jury's out on that, but I don't think there's anything wrong if you can afford to do it, is to take off at lunchtime and go meet your partner and have a quickie. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, so I want to talk about this type A personality, and we got about a minute and a half left in this segment, so it's probably going to have to go over to the next segment. But can you kind of describe and explain this type A personality? What does that really mean? A lot of people may not really understand that term.
It was a term that was coined actually back in the 50s by two cardiologists. And I think what's really important about type A and all the personality behaviors is that they're learned behaviors. So they're not something that's innate to us, but it is something that we learn along the way. And there's some awesome things about being a type A. You know, we're good planners, we meet deadlines, we're multitaskers, we have a strong drive, and we're perfectionists. And those are all wonderful things. What happens is when we let those type A behaviors get out of control, and then all of a sudden we become the slave to these behaviors versus using these great tools that we have. And that's where we get the anxiety when we have to wait. We're stressed when, our to-do lists get too large.
Okay, Melissa,
we become very frantic and overwhelmed.
Melissa, we're going to have to pick this up on the other side. It's Mike Manahan, Biz Rap Radio, talking with Melissa Heisler about stress, and we'll be back right after these messages. And welcome back to Biz Rap Radio. I'm your host, Mike Manahan. We, of course, are the show all about entrepreneurs and small business people. If you've just joined us today, we are talking with Melissa Heisler. She is a stress reduction expert and an author. She wrote the book From Type A to Type Me, How to Stop Doing Life and Start Living It. And you can go to her website, which is www.fromtypeatotypeme.com, and you can actually download a free chapter of her book. And we're talking about how stress affects small business people, entrepreneurs, and what you can do to maybe alleviate some of that stress. And Melissa, thanks for sticking with us for another segment.
I'm happy to be here. It's a great topic to talk about because I love the entrepreneurs, and they're really the backbone to our country. And they need to enjoy themselves while they're building their business.
Yeah, absolutely. I hate to see people who are, I guess I would call it suffering in what they do. Bad enough if you go to work for somebody else, you can be suffering working for somebody else. But, the entrepreneurship and the small business road should really be fun. And yes, you're going to have to occasionally go through some stressful times, but there's a trade-off in that you should hopefully enjoy yourself a little bit more. And it always worries me and bothers me when I see that entrepreneur who it looks like he's doing penance or something in terms of running his business, and he's not experiencing and enjoying the freedoms and the other benefits that come along from being an entrepreneur and having your own business. So look, if you're listening today and you're an entrepreneur, pat yourself on the back. You're doing a great job out there. We need you. And have a little fun. Enjoy yourself. However you describe fun, as long as it's legal in the state in which you're listening, go for it. So, Melissa, we were talking about these type A personalities, and you said that these are learned behaviors, but I'm thinking, gosh, anybody I know who's a type A, they were a type A by the time they were about 5 years old. So are we able to go back and unlearn behaviors that we may have learned when we were 1, 2, 3, 4 years old?
Yes, we can. And the key to it is actually becoming aware of the behaviors we're doing. So a lot of times we move through our life and we are just on autopilot, and we're reacting throughout the day using that file cabinet of things that we've learned when we were less than 5 years old. And if we can become aware of those reactions that we're having, those automatic responses that we're going through, and look at them and say, is this actually helping or hurting me? Then we can start making new choices as to saying, that's really not the thing that's going to help propel me forward. I'm going to let this behavior go away and replace it with something more positive. Or, this behavior is actually working really well for me, and I'm going to continue to feed it. But we need to become aware first of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and if it's actually benefiting us. And then we can start making those changes.
So we need to go through some self-assessment, self-analysis, if you will, monitoring and perhaps even recording our own behaviors. You know, I had an interesting experience some years ago. I had 2 employees working for me. Both of these people, by the way, fairly senior employees. It was a reasonably good-sized company. And every time something went wrong, one of those employees, the first thing out of her mouth was, whose fault was it? Who could she blame? Mm-hmm. And the other employee, the first thing out of her mouth was, what did I do wrong? Where did I fall down on this? And I could predict every time a major problem occurred in the business that I would get the exact same reaction from both of those people. One would be looking for somebody to blame. The other would be worried that she had done something wrong. And I tried talking to these people about that, about their behaviors, and working with these people for a number of years, they never changed. The one always went to who to blame. The other one always went, what did I do wrong? And many cases, the one who was looking for somebody to blame, the person to blame was herself. So it is. I guess the lesson there is we can't really change other people's behaviors, but we can probably, maybe if we really work at it, we can change our own behaviors.
Absolutely. And it's the hardest thing. I think we start wanting to change other people's behaviors, whether it's because we don't want to look at our own responsibility, or whether it seems it's easier to change those things outside of ourselves. But the truth is, the only thing we can change is ourselves. And so you had the knowledge of how these 2 employees acted, and then you could have a choice of, I know where they're going to go with this. How can I respond to them to make them better employees and help them to move forward? You can't change how they are, but you can try to reframe the way that they work in order to make it better for your business. And what's interesting about your story is both of those women were coming out of fear. Mm-hmm. One of them wanted to pass the blame outside of herself so that she didn't get attacked and get the bad reviews. And the other one was constantly, it's a feeling of inadequacy. And unfortunately, a lot of women feel that way, that they're immediately thinking that they've done something wrong and taking responsibility sometimes for things that are outside of their control.
Right. It's very complex. Okay, but now, what about a type? And I guess the opposite of a type A is is it a type B personality?
Not necessarily opposite, but type B is a little bit more relaxed than a type A. But what's interesting is with our current society, with cell phones and that constant connectivity and technology and buzzers going off every moment, that a lot of type Bs that are type Bs naturally are picking up some of the type A multitasking behaviors just because of our current work environment of all that connectivity.
Yeah, and this is really a huge change in our society. I remember when I was growing up, my dad went on an annual vacation every fall. He went off with the guys on a hunting and fishing trip, and they literally took the pack horses and headed off into the mountains. Well, 2 weeks would go by. You didn't know if they were dead or alive. You couldn't get a hold of them. They were living, off the land, if you will, and what they could carry with them. And the world seemed to survive just fine. Nowadays, you go on vacation, you hop on a plane in Los Angeles to fly to Maui for a week, and the minute that friggin' plane lands in Honolulu, or you're got the cell phone out, and you're checking your emails, and you're checking your text messages. We become slaves to these electronic devices.
And I think we've lost touch with the joy of life. I remember we went through the Panama Canal last year, and it's an amazing experience. It was the 100th anniversary of the making of the canal, and there were these 2 20, 30-somethings that were on their phones the entire time. I think they were looking at each other or the phone and not at the incredible natural and human wonder that we're looking at. and they were talking about business.
Oh,
it's
my
like we need to take and drop these things every so often and get back in touch with our humanity.
Yeah, I called an associate of mine actually a few weeks ago, and he had a recording on his phone, and he said, I'm busy working on a project. I'm not going to be answering any phone calls or any emails for the next 3 hours. And I thought, well, that's an interesting way to check out, but we need to do that. Yeah, Melissa, we're coming up. We got like literally a minute and a half left. I want to give out your information again. Go to www.fromtypeA-typeme.com. You can download a free chapter of Melissa's book, which is From Type A to Type Me, How to Stop Doing Life and Start Living It. We've been talking about stress, its effect on you as a business person, how you need to manage it, and how you can manage it. Melissa, with literally 1 minute left, what final thoughts can you leave with our listeners?
It's taking back control of your workday. Instead of thinking you're responding to emails, you're checking emails. You put yourself that you're not the slave of your email or the slave of your to-do list, but these are tools for you to use to run your business. So put yourself back in the driver's seat again, and remember to act and not react. Every time you react, we're adding stress to ourselves because we feel out of control. So put yourself back in that actor role where you're in control. Stay centered, breathe, and remember, the more fun you have, the more productive you actually are.
Fabulous. Great words from Melissa Heisler, stress reduction expert and author. Melissa, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No problem. This is Mike Manahan, your host, Biz Rap Radio, and we will be back right after these messages. And that was Melissa Heisler, From Type A to Type Me, How to Stop Doing Life and Start Living. She's a stress reduction expert and coach. You can check her out at itsmylifeinc.com. That's itsmylifeinc.com. Again, Melissa Heisler. Very interesting conversation with her. Now let's turn to something that is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. Credit reports. Oh, yes. Now, you probably listen to the radio and have heard all of these advertisements on how you can get your credit score and how important your credit score is and how important it is to monitor your credit score. And I'll be honest, I've never done a lot in terms of monitoring my credit score. I've never really found the need to. I applied for loans. I got them, and all went very well. I never really knew what my credit score was. But recently, talking to people, stressing, how important it is you know what your credit score is. And this credit score is vital to you getting things like mortgages and car loans and credit cards. And wow, that sounds significant to me. So, I decided to get my credit report, and you can get it from a number of different places. There's three major sources that people go to get their credit reports. There's Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, I think, are the three major companies. And I couldn't get mine for whatever reason from TransUnion. I went to some website. It's annualcreditreport.com. It apparently gives you a free credit report. If you actually want your credit score, you got to pay a little bit extra. I wasn't so much concerned about my credit score as what was on my credit report because, I'll be honest, I've never really studied it in detail. I've never really had to. I've applied for mortgages. I've had mortgages on houses I've owned. I've had mortgages on rental properties. I've got a ton of credit cards. I've had some car loans in the past. But again, I never had a problem. So I never really looked at what information these credit reporting companies have on me. But this time I said, I got to take a look. So I went on this website. I think it's annualfreecreditreport.com or annualcreditreport.com, something like that. You get a free credit report. You can request one from all three of the major credit reporting companies, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Well, for whatever reason, TransUnion, I couldn't get that one. It said if I wanted it, give them a phone call or something. So I just went on to the other two. I did get my credit report from both Experian and Equifax, and gosh, each one of these reports is about 40 pages long of lengthy detail. And I started to look at the information that is in there. And, a lot of it was pretty obvious. I have a mortgage, and the mortgage is in there, and it lists the amount of the mortgage and what my payments are. And I have some credit cards, and it lists those and what the payments are. And I still have a school loan because I went back to school, and I took out a school loan to finance it. But so there are things on my credit report that makes some sense. But then I started to look additionally what detail information they have on the credit report, and some of this is really bizarre, particularly in terms of small business people who are active in running their businesses. There are going to be some strange things on a credit report. Now, how this affects the credit score, I don't know, but it just seems to me to be a little bit weird. And I'll give you some examples. My credit report lists recent addresses, implying these are probably places that I have lived or something like that, and it lists about 10 of them. And, of course, these are not places I have lived. Some are work addresses. Some are rental properties that I have owned. And it would seem a bit weird to go on to somebody's credit report and look and see all of these different things. I mean, why don't they have a home address, and then why don't they have rental properties? That information is not secret. That's public information. You can get that information. Other interesting thing is employment history. Now, I didn't see any employment history on Experian. Equifax had no employment history. It says no employment history available. Experian listed employment history. Did not list California State University, Dominguez Hills, which I have worked at since 2009 as a university professor amongst my consulting practice. So very bizarre, because I know I have applied for credit. I got a mortgage 2 years ago, and one of the principal occupations listed on my credit application for that mortgage was the fact that in addition to doing a radio show and being a business consultant, yes, believe it or not, I am a professor at Cal State Dominguez Hills. That information does not even show up on either Experian or Equifax's credit report. Now, an interesting thing that also doesn't show up on these reports, there's no income information. Now, it seems every time I fill out a credit application, anywhere, one of the things they want to know is income. Now, how can you really give somebody a credit score just based on their debt if you don't know what their income is? I mean, if I've got $1 million worth of debt and an income of $30,000 a year, I'm in trouble. If I've got $1 million in debt and an income of $500,000 a year, not so bad. Yet nowhere on the credit report does it state income. On top of that, nowhere on the credit report does it give any history of assets owned. So while in my example, it shows a number of properties with which I'm associated, somebody might, this guy moves a lot. No, those are rental properties. I own a number of rental income properties. But those assets and the assets I own do not appear on the credit report. So everything that appears on the credit report is to do with debt. And all the ratios and I guess how they figure these credit scores, I have no idea. It's a deep mystery, but it's all based upon the debt you have outstanding and I guess your payment history. Nothing to do with how much you're worth, nothing to do with how much your income is. Now, I don't know, I just find it curious that you can actually make a credit decision on somebody and not have information on their income, information on their assets, and just simply be looking at their debt. Now, one other thing for entrepreneurs to keep in mind, I started to go through my credit report, and I have a couple of different businesses, and each of those businesses, I allocate credit cards to those particular businesses. That credit card is for my travel company that I own. That credit card is for my consulting business that I own. That credit card is for the radio station. And in spite of the fact that some of those credit cards were technically opened up as business accounts, a number of them appear on my credit report. So how are they differentiating between my business credit cards, which are paid for by business income, which is not included on the credit report, and my personal credit cards? Now, one of the things that I know a lot of small business people do is we use our credit cards for business. And used to be in the old days, banks actually gave out loans to small businesses. Well, now, it's pretty tough to get a loan from a bank for a small business. In fact, I talked to my contact at Bank of America, and I said, look, rather than having these credit cards, why don't I just get a loan for this small business? It doesn't need a lot. I think I said, why don't I get a $30,000 loan? Oh, no, we don't do that. Yeah, hang on, a bank doesn't loan to small businesses. What sense does that make? But so what I know, a lot of entrepreneurs use their credit cards for their businesses. Sometimes they pay them off. Sometimes they run balances. But really, when you think about it, you're going to go apply for a mortgage, and they're looking at your credit report, and it includes a whole bunch of stuff that relates to your small business because you have a credit card that you use for your small business. And then my understanding is, and I actually had to go through this a couple of years ago when I applied for a mortgage, I had to prove to the bank that the mortgage company that, in fact, my credit cards were being paid by my business, not by me. Yet, why it's even relevant, I have no idea, because the fact is the credit report does not include anything about my assets. It doesn't include anything about my income. All it includes on there is my debt and my payment history. So, to me, it's a huge mystery. I think it's completely inadequate, and I think if credit grantors these days are relying on nothing but a bizarre credit score from these companies, by the way, that have been highlighted on 60 Minutes as being very uncooperative and often having a great deal of incorrect information, which is very hard to get changed. I'm not too worried about it for myself, but it makes a big impact on entrepreneurs. We need to have good credit scores to be entrepreneurs, and I'm not so sure the system that's been devised really works. Here at BizRap Radio, we believe we can fix the United States of America through a fundamental concept that individuals pursuing their own economic interests in free markets will create more prosperity for more people than can ever be achieved through government regulation and a planned economy. BizRap Radio, fixing America through individual economic freedom. That's it for this week. We'll be back again next week with another edition of BizRap Radio.